Let's start the show.
Oopsie, the worst rapper alive. Oops. Yeah. Big Mac's back on the mic like oops. Back on the horse, still jumping through hoops. The missing link in pink, I don't lip sync. Just to be clear, choking isn't my kink, but I do it anyway sometimes, I guess. Gotta laugh now, die later in my times of stress. I'm blessed, feeling good, charged up like a Hadouken.
Hello and welcome to the Worst Wrestling Podcast. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. We are counting up, down, I don't know. We're doing our top 10 King of the Ring winners with King of the Ring coming up next week. I thought this would be a fun little break from just recapping the shows every week. So we're going to get right into it. Number 10, Ted DiBiase. In 1988, this was his first real singles win. This really cemented his career. Now, it did really cement him as like an upper mid card level talent, kind of, right at that perennial intercontinental champion level, but never quite at that world heavyweight level. But Ted DiBiase did, in fact, win the King of the Ring, and since it was one of the crowning achievements of his stoic career, I decided to go with him at number 10. At number 9, we have Edge. In 2001. So this was actually a really interesting one. And I was watching back a lot of the old King of the Rings pay-per-views, kind of getting prepped for this show and also for obviously the upcoming King of the Ring, the return of the King of the Ring pay-per-view, which we'll be getting from Saudi Arabia. And so next week I will be doing a live review of the show because it's going to air at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'll be coming in at 4:20 Eastern Standard to do my review immediately after the show. So I've been getting prepared and watching a lot of the old King of the Rings. And I actually started with the newest 2002, and I started watching them back and just kind of picking through my favorites. But 2001 stood out to me as one that I knew I was going to watch right away because of obviously Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon's street fight, which is one of the most insane matches I think I've ever seen. But just because Kurt Angle appeared 3 times on the card, including in this match, the King of the Ring finals against Edge. Edge also previously appearing on the show with 2 matches. He had his semifinals match against Rhino. So he defeated Test, Perry Saturn, Rhino, and then Kurt Angle. Because basically it was Shane McMahon came in to do the run-in, caused an interference, set up Edge up for the win, and also set up obviously his street fight with Kurt Angle later on the show. But, this was an important win in Edge's career because I think it's important to remember that at this time in his career, Edge had just recently broken up with Christian, and they were both kind of floating around the mid-card, really kind of seeking their singles run and characters and honing in on what would ultimately make them successful as single wrestlers. And Edge, was already kind of part of the SmackDown 6, which through, that early 2000 to late 2000 era, you had Rey Mysterio, Edge, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, and I think it was Booker T was the 6th one. So you had 6 guys that were legitimately on the verge, if not already considered main eventers. And Edge, again, the King of the Ring really helped propel him and sent him down the path of his illustrious singles career. Number 8, the great Harley Race. In 1986, he won the King of the Ring. I think Harley was one of the first to truly adopt the King moniker as part of his gimmick in a way that truly enhanced his character. So he was doing some really classic heel work with the King of the Ring stuff. He basically, he would make opponents kneel before him, and if they refused, he'd beat them up and then kind of force them to kiss his feet. So it was like, again, really great heel work. And this was coming off an illustrious career in the NWA. Now, he did not ever quite attain the same heights in the WWF because of the ultimate ceiling capper, Hulk Hogan. Hey, brother, I'm going to have to hold on to this title, brother. But Hulk Hogan and Harley Race did have like a long running feud. Harley Race was a primary heel and foe for Hogan. So although he never got the title and never quite attained the heights in the WWF that he had attained in the NWA, still one of the best King of the Ring winners of all time. And, especially, again, the way that he harnessed the gimmick and turned it into like a great heel gimmick. One of the first to really do that. So that was obviously a revolutionary move at the time. Number 7, Owen Hart. This was in 1994. Owen Hart winning King of the Ring really was the victory that allowed him to step out of his brother's shadow. Obviously, Bret the Hitman Hart, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and we will talk about him later on this list, so make sure that you stay tuned. But yeah, Owen Hart winning in 1994 really... he was already considered like a fantastic technical worker, but I think he was viewed as a elite mid-carder. Again, one of these guys that would win the Intercontinental Championship 6 to 8 times, but maybe never gets a world heavy title run. And I think the King of the Ring tournament and the feud that he then had with his brother Bret, leading to one of the early Dave Meltzer 5-star matches. Even though, again, Owen never caught the big one, he never did get that world title, and then unfortunately, obviously, had the terrible accident and passed away. But the King of the Ring really was a befitting honor at the time, and again, really helped elevate his character from just being that elite upper mid-carder to he was flirting with the idea of, I think, a world title run. And if not for the tragic events surrounding his death, I absolutely believe that he would have had a world title run or 2 or 3 in him at some point during his career. At number 6, we already kind of talked about him a little bit earlier, but my main man, Kurt Angle. It's true. So Kurt Angle, even though in 2001 probably was his best appearance on King of the Ring in terms of the actual pay-per-view, because he really helped carry that pay-per-view, again, appearing 3 times on the card. He had a match. I fucking can't even remember who the opener was against. But he had the opening match, and then he had the match against Edge, which Shane interfered, and then he had the match against Shane. So it's crazy to think that, that match with Shane McMahon, that street fight, like Kurt Angle had already wrestled 2 times on the card. And again, just the motor that he was able to get through that street fight, and then just the fucking savagery that befell Shane McMahon. But anyways, the year prior, it was actually in the year 2000 that Kurt Angle won the largest King of the Ring tournament at that time. So similar to actually the way that we have it now, because of the 2 rosters with Raw and SmackDown, you had a 16-man tournament on either side. Again, showing you just how deep the current day roster is, that they were able to have a 16-man tournament on Raw and SmackDown, culminating in 2 semifinals. But previous to that, the largest one ever was in 2000, when they did do a 32-man tournament. And even though Kurt Angle was well on his way already, having won, the European and Intercontinental Championships on several occasions, this basically continued to solidify and catapult Kurt Angle into like officially being a main eventer, because even though it was a really awkward ass feud, right on the back of the King of the Ring win, he had the feud with Triple H, where it was like that weird romance angle with Stephanie McMahon that was super awkward. He did come out obviously on the losing side of that, but then shortly after ended up winning his first title from The Rock at No Mercy. So again, really the King of the Ring tournament in its heyday. Now, when it first started, they didn't know it. Like Vince didn't really know what the fuck he was doing with it, and that's why I don't have Don Morocco, who did win the inaugural tournament, on this list, because at that time they didn't really know it. It was just kind of a tournament that they did it was like a glorified house show, just kind of seeing if they could pop ratings, I guess. But it ultimately became the idea of having a tournament to kind of, especially in the eyes of the fans, name a guy that you're going to have elevate from the mid card into the main event scene. And so again, Kurt Angle already was on the fast track. One of the greatest things about Kurt Angle isn't just the fact that he is so technical and amazing in the ring, it's the fact that he did it so fast. And I definitely do think the amateur background plays into that. Just speaking from a personal standpoint, not that I've ever tried to become a professional wrestler or anything, but let's just pretend for the sake of argument that tomorrow I went to Montreal. I forget the name of the gym. Actually, you know what? This is obviously bad fucking video and audio, but I am going to look it up. It is worth looking up the wrestling school in Montreal because I want to make sure I get the name right. So apologies, just bear with me for 2 seconds here. Oh no, okay. Torture Chamber, that's it. Torture Chamber Pro Wrestling Dojo in Montreal, Quebec. So that was if I were to go there tomorrow, for example, there's also Leduc Pro Wrestling Academy is another one, but they're both pretty much 5-star rated, and both excellent wrestling schools. Quebec has a deep, rich wrestling history and tradition, even beyond just the WWE. So, I really love Quebec wrestling and the history of it. But anyways, sorry. Getting away from what I was saying about if I were to go into a wrestling school tomorrow, it would be an easier transition for me, learning a lot of the moves and just getting the flow of the technique, and even the reciprocating nature of wrestling, professional wrestling. It comes to you a lot easier if you have an amateur wrestling background. Just a lot of the moves that you do come more naturally if you have that background. So, and it's not to say that you can't learn without it, but I would definitely say that if you have a natural background as a amateur wrestler, and especially if you were not a power guy or a straight speed guy, you were more of a technical guy, that translates. And so it doesn't actually surprise me that Kurt Angle was on a technical level the fastest to ever get it on a pro wrestling level in terms of transferring from being a straight amateur wrestler to a professional wrestler. You even look at Brock Lesnar. I think Brock Lesnar, very underrated in his early days of what he was doing in a WWE ring. And yes, he obviously kind of, as he became a big star, didn't have to do as much in the later portion of his career. It was just German suplex after German suplex. But even like the ability for him to pop those 16 Germans on John Cena comes again from that natural wrestling background. And so not every guy can make it work. You have your Gable Stevens of the world that just got cut recently from the WWE. He was supposed to be the next big thing. But I would say that I definitely think it helps. So number 5 time. No, it's not Booker T. Booker T's a little bit higher on this list, guys. Come on. Booker T killed this fucking gimmick. He's not much higher, though. I'll tell you he's next, to be honest. But no, right here at number 5, the next big thing, Brock Lesnar. So before Borky Brock, before he ever went to the UFC, before, by the way, a failed stint in the NFL. And also, here's a weird little tidbit. Brock Lesnar, the only human being to appear in a Madden game, a UFC game, and a WWE game. But Brock Lesnar, in 2002, after having made his debut a whole 3 months prior, won the tournament, beat RVD in the finals. Also, RVD, just a mensch. I just want to say that RVD, I often forget just how good RVD was and how much I loved him, especially like when I was younger. It's one of those things of like your favorites do, I feel like, fade a little as you get older and discover new wrestlers. But then when I go back and watch RVD matches, I'm like, fuck, man, RVD literally so underrated, is one of the greatest in-ring wrestlers of all time. Like, I don't even feel like that's a leap to say. You look at his regular moveset and the shit that he was pulling off back in the fucking like 90s and early 2000s, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. The way that he was able to combine like the martial arts and the high flying and the technical a bit, like that kind of shit would play so well nowadays, and obviously does, but like, man, so ahead of his time in what he was doing, so underrated. Obviously, his time with the WWF, I think, only stalled by the fact that, and again, this isn't even a drag on him. This is commending him for standing by his principles and his character and his morals and values of, like, you know, not capitulating and submitting to the kind of bullshit backstage politics, especially back in those days of fucking Vince McMahon, the fucking ultimate puppet master. Like, Rob just wasn't having that shit. And, you know, it definitely, I think, affected the opportunities that he had in the WWF, and even still had an underrated world heavyweight title run when he won it from John Cena at ECW One Night Stand, and literally one of my favorite pay-per-view matches of all time. It's funny that I've been talking about Rob Van Dam this whole time, and this is supposed to be about Brock Lesnar, but hey, you know what? With what we learned recently about Borg, probably for the best, to be perfectly honest. But hey, Borg did win this match. It was a fucking awesome spot where at the end, Rob goes for the 5-star frog splash, but gets distracted by Heyman on the outside for like a second, and he still goes for it. And Brock pops up and catches him in the F5 and hits it for the win. So it was a fucking great finish. But yeah, I mean, at the time, it also for that year was locking in Brock for a WWE Championship match at SummerSlam, which would end up being the infamous WWE Championship match against The Rock, where he won, and at the time was the youngest WWE champion in the history of the WWE, and all of that was on the back of King of the Ring 2002. At number 4, this is where my man Booker T comes in. in 2006. So this is actually the latest addition to the list, because a lot of these are, from back in the day. Booker T. Booker T is responsible both for having one of the greatest King of the Ring gimmicks of all time and killing the fucking gimmick at the same time. Booker T embodied the shtick and gimmick of King Booker, and obviously including his wife as Queen Sharmell, leading to some of the best character work that he ever did in his career, and a well-deserved world title run, which had been a long time coming. Booker T was so fucking good at what he did, and it was such a resurgence for his career that they tried very terrible, horrendous, watered-down versions with Sheamus and Bad News Barrett that literally almost fucking killed King of the Ring and ultimately wiped it out of existence for a while, until now we are finally seeing the return of King of the Ring. So Booker T was so good as King of the Ring that he both embodied the gimmick and torched it for everybody that came after him until this most recent iteration, where they're not gonna, hopefully have the whoever wins come parade around with a shitty scepter and crown for a couple weeks. If we can just avoid like the king gimmick shtick, like I know they're gonna refer to themselves as the king for at least like a month after the fact, but no capes. All right, no capes, no scepters, and if they want to have the crown, the cool ones that they have, even that honestly is a little bit like you're gonna start to look like the Burger King after a while. So I would just like maybe have the crown in like a trophy case somewhere, or maybe they carry it around. I don't know, but like I said, Booker T, so good, he almost killed the fucking gimmick. At number 3. The Macho Man, Randy Savage. Ooh, yeah. In 1987, 2 years after his WWF debut, even though he was a heel at the time, Randy Savage won the King of the Ring, and he ended up going on a babyface run. So first, he would have a babyface run against the Honky Tonk Man, and then that was for the Intercontinental title. And even though he didn't win that title, it really, that whole winning the King of the Ring and that run kind of cemented him as a top star. And then in classic WWF Vince McMahon fashion, they did this like really convoluted story and angle where it was like Haku won King of the Ring or something, and then he let Jim Duggan borrow the title of King of the Ring, like not the title, like championship, like the actual moniker title of King of the Ring. And Macho Man said, "Oh well, I'm gonna fight Jim Duggan for that." I don't know. Either way, doing that basically ended up having a gimmick change. And we got the Macho King in 1989. And really the Macho King through 1989 to like 1992. And when they did all the Mega Powers stuff, that was really Randy's best gimmick in the WWF. And, it turned the crowd both ways. It was a rare double flip that I think worked in a sense, because normally when you have a guy that just flip-flops between heel and face all the time, eventually the crowd gets sick of it, where they just generally don't care. We've seen that unfortunately with guys like the Big Show before. But with Macho Man, he kind of went into it as a heel, went on a little bit of a face run, but then really kicked in the heel work to high gear as the Macho King. But then the Macho King started to get over, and so even though he was like beating guys up with the scepter and stuff eventually, and then the Miss Elizabeth stuff, and then the Mega Powers, it's like he very much kind of had so much charisma, Randy did, that it was hard for him to ever really truly stay long term as a heel, but he was effective as both. And he's one of the true guys in history, and very rarely do I ever feel like characters are exclusively that characters are very truly hybrid. Like most of the time, like yes, every wrestler in a sense is hybrid, but I mean, like, here's a perfect example. All right, Triple H. Yes, Triple H has been on 1,000 face runs. Currently, he's beloved every time he comes out. D-Generation X has had a bunch of face runs. Doesn't matter. In my mind, I always think of Triple H as a heel, the cerebral assassin. Meanwhile, Stone Cold, even though he had that failed heel run, I'm always going to think of him as a face. The Rock is like considered one of the greatest heels of all time, except the problem is he's so good that he becomes popular, he becomes a face again. So it's like The Rock, again, almost has so much charisma. It's like he's good at being a heel, but I still, with him, I feel like he's kind of close, at least to the Macho Man, of being able to do both. But even then, it's like I truly view him as like a baby face. I think ultimately the people want to cheer him even when he's making fun of them and shit. So, it's rare that you get guys that I feel like are true hybrids, and Macho Man was a true hybrid. So, and like I said, really capitalized on, not only winning the King of the Ring tournament, but then ultimately acquiring the gimmick at some point to become the Macho King. At number 2, we talked about his brother before, and now we get to the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Bret the Hitman Hart, the only man to ever win 2 King of the Ring tournaments in 1991 and in 1993. So there was some kind of lapse there where they didn't have one in 92. So these were also technically back-to-back tournament wins. And, the actual tournaments themselves. So like the first one really was more important for Bret and his career, cementing him as a true single star. But the second win, especially with the involvement of Shawn Michaels, literally began to change the landscape of professional wrestling into the modern version that we see today. So you talk about that transition from like the huge, bulky power guys into the smaller, faster, more technical performers that we see today, like, the Daniel Bryans of the world, the Adam Coles of the world, the Ricochet and Will Ospreays of the world. Like all of these guys, in a sense, exist because of the way that Bret and Shawn ultimately changed the industry. And even, the guys that came immediately after them, like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle, even though those guys were yoked, they never were as, like huge as like your Kevin Nashes and your Hulk Hogan's and your Undertakers. And it's like the idea that they weren't viewed necessarily as main event guys back in like the 70s and 80s. And not to say that there weren't outliers, but just in general, especially that very cartoonish, muscly, like characteristics that Vince McMahon was very looking for, that started to change, especially in the WWF, through a lot of what Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels did in the early to late 90s. And it really, again, started a lot with the King of the Ring tournament, especially that second one in 1993 with Bret the Hitman Hart. And at number 1, there's only one guy that it could be. Perhaps the man most synonymous with the King of the Ring, as it became the launching pad for what is arguably the greatest career in the history of professional wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1996 would win the King of the Ring and cut one of the most legendary and definitely most money-making promos of all time on Jake the Snake Roberts. You know, that promo literally probably made billions of dollars for the WWF. And it's crazy because it almost didn't happen. That's right. So originally in 1996, the plan was for Triple H to win the King of the Ring. And I actually didn't know this. There are definitely going to be like super wrestling historians out there that are going to know this already. But essentially, the plan was that in 1996, Triple H was supposed to win the King of the Ring tournament. And he did not, because essentially Vince McMahon and the higher-ups changed their mind, and it was a punishment, a continued punishment from the curtain call, where, again, if you're not familiar with the curtain call incident, that's a infamous incident in wrestling history where Triple H, Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon, I think it was X-Pac was the fourth guy. Anyways, the bottom line is Nash and Razor were leaving to go to WCW, and they did the thing with the click. Oh, I think the fourth guy was, sorry, I think it was Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and Razor, and they all did the Too Sweet, the Wolf Pack, the click, whatever the fuck. And basically, Shawn at the time couldn't get in trouble for it, really. And obviously, Razor and Kevin Nash were leaving, and so it all fell on Triple H. He basically had to eat shit for like a year, maybe a year and a half. So yes, in 1996, originally it was actually Triple H that was supposed to win this tournament, and because of the curtain call, they ended up going with little old Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had recently just gone through a gimmick change, leaving the ringmaster shit behind, coming out as Stone Cold Steve Austin. And even though he wouldn't win his first the World Wrestling Federation title for like another 2 years until 1998, this was ultimately the tournament, the match, the promo, the pay-per-view. This is what kicked off Stone Cold Steve Austin 316. And Austin 316 says, that's the end of the show, baby. Ooh, as always, I appreciate you guys out there for watching. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure you super kick that subscribe button. Join us next week when we will be reviewing the actual King of the Ring results for 2024. And until then, I will catch all of you guys on the flip side.
My positive contact results in affirmative impact. Never vulgarize on raps. I'm never primitive, but cannibalistic, vicious characteristics, hereditary potency, episodic genes, yo. Empathy, HMCs at extraordinary speed. Some of me is light, some of them razor blades and grease in your bare feet. I see your fucking colleagues misprise you very much to your dismay. So today, I can say you won't be running away. Hold your tail between your legs. I'm gonna advocate when you fail below stakes. I'll take a hacksaw to you cockeyed, mumble rap, slack jaws. Leave you shredded on the side like some coleslaw. The double time with that clothesline from hell like Bradshaw. I'm toxic like septic shock. A dying breed like anorexic.